It's part one of Barbenheimer. We will be reviewing both of these movies that everyone has been talking about. So let's jump right into this because we're tackling the beast, the big beast today. We are tackling Oppenheimer first.
Like this movie more than others of Nolan's work, the visual spectacle of it, mix of CG and practical effects that he used for a lot of the explosions and the depiction of how Oppenheimer views the quantum realm, and those kind of things. Those visuals like need to be done on IMAX, like the fidelity and like the crispness of it. So I can see why, as a director, why that has always been his chosen medium for his films. Like all his movies, like no, I'm shooting at IMAX first, and y'all can down convert this for other screens. But like I want people to actually see every single raw detail.
I've seen other movies in IMAX before, and it doesn't really, I guess whatever the impact of it was supposed to be hasn't really landed on me. Like it was just loud. Like it didn't really bring a different element to like what the screening experience or the viewing experience should be. But for this, it like completely fit, and it was like totally a part of like why you go to see one of these movies in the theater and on IMAX. Like it totally made sense. From Memento kind of onwards, I've pretty much seen most of his films. So like you can see the culmination of like all of his work in this. Stunningly visually stunning, but also emotional and like very important. This couldn't be like more timely in terms of like what they're discussing and how important it is to like what we're living through right now. Best film of the year for me, best film I've seen in a long time. Like, but in terms of like a big blockbuster, like the budget is astronomical. You're playing around with really complex subject matter. Like this was the best of that could have been. Like I don't think anyone else could have done a movie like this on this scale except for Chris Nolan.
Like he is honestly one of the premier auteurs of our generation. Like for the past, I want to say 2 decades. Like he's slowly become like that guy on top. Like this, bits and pieces and stuff were there from when he did Batman Begins. But you know, since then, he's been on like a nonstop roller coaster.
When I was watching it, I was kind of understanding what was happening, mainly because of other films that didn't have. I'm not sure if it inspired his film or not, but The Theory of Everything, Eddie Redmayne playing Stephen Hawking.
Yeah.
Yeah, that and The Imitation Game with Benedict Cumberbatch.
Yeah, same. I had the same. Yeah.
Who played Alan Turing. So having that, you know, those films kind of in the back of my mind really helped prepare me for like the intricacies of the mathematics. Not that I would ever understand anything on that level, but just in terms of like understanding the world of like being so intelligent that like you can operate on that level to discuss things like this, where you are theorizing about it and you can actually practically make it happen. I was like, okay, I feel like I did some homework for this. You know, like I didn't come in blind, which helped with the viewing experience. And I guess what was Oppie's like responsibility and how he felt about the fact that he was responsible for so many deaths. I think that was one thing that the character always grapples with, kind of like I've invented this, you know, weapon of mass destruction that could literally end the world. And I did it for reasons that I thought were important. But now that scene when they're in Washington, when they have a list of the places where they could drop it, I was like, whoa, that's crazy. Like just the amount of like decision making of like when you get to decide who lives and who dies, that's a very scary place to be.
And I think that's probably why I like this movie a lot. It puts him, I wouldn't say as a gray area, but it's his position. Like they even talk about his personal beliefs, like whether political or whatnot. He said, I don't focus just on one area. You kind of, to be a fully developed person and form your opinion on things, you got to pull from every source. And he tries to rationale it, like, if this is dangerous and bad, we're going to use it once. And then, you know, the good part of human beings and humanity and that natural impulse you think everybody has will tell everybody, okay, we will never do this again. And luckily it has, like, you know, has. But for the part that he did not expect is after seeing the spectacle of the devastating power that that man little boy had on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They went right into like we want more as a threat deterrent, and he was trying to say, look, they know we have the capability, and now they're going to see a production of theirs. It's a no-win scenario, and it was always in the back of his head, knowing because he said himself during the calculations, like there is a potential chance that we destroy the world with one nuclear bomb.
I really did like the portrayal of Oppenheimer, especially because, you know, when you do biopics and stuff, there's a tendency to gloss things over and make things like a lot nicer than they actually were because, you know, you don't want to offend people's families or their legacy or and I really like that they were like straight up like, no, he was cheating on his wife, like and he was not only cheating on his wife with Florence Pugh character, he was cheating on her with somebody else's wife, like he was kind of a mess. One conversation that Benny Safdie and Oppenheimer have, or Killian have, is that, you know, he's like, well, I never know where you stand on things. People like that make other people uncomfortable because they're like, well, I don't know like what you're about. So I can't, so there's like an inherent untrustworthiness about that person. And maybe that was the reason why it was easier for him to turn on him. Also, Benny Safdie being in this movie, yes, like I love that 2 movies I saw this year, he was in it. Like he is an incredible actor, and I am so happy that he's in things. Put Benny Safdie in everything. Like that's how I feel. I think in his actions where he says, no, we don't need any more of these weapons out there, he is making a stance. Even if he never verbally says, I think that what I did was a mistake. The 2 best scenes in this movie for me was one, the Trinity test. I think everyone can pretty much agree that that was exquisite filmmaking. Like that was an incredible thing that you saw. But also the speech he gives afterwards in the gym. When the bomb actually goes off and it's a close up of Killian's face, I immediately felt, and I feel like this is what the character was feeling, was like, oh God, what did we do?
Yeah.
Right? Because it's like, it worked great, but
at what cost?
This is really bad. Yeah, at what cost? And then in the second scene, when he's giving the speech, the patriotism that everyone's displaying is so rampant and like misplaced because they don't know what this really means. They think, okay, yes, we're going to win the war, America, let's go. But then it stops and you see that you hear the screams of the people who have been burned, whose houses have been like completely decimated. You see people getting sick because of the radiation. Like you see like the war zone that this place is because of what he invented and because of what they were doing there. And that was just such a incredible scene to me because it's like when you play God and literally like you what you're able to do because you are so brilliant has so much human cost. It's like that really weighs on you. And I think that's what Killian was talking about in the interviews where he was saying that like physically he becomes completely like, you know, withdrawn. He becomes a lot more thin, depressed because it's like the weight of that choice weighs so heavily on him.
Ludwig is amazing. Like Ludwig is my dude when it comes to these scores. Like I've been on Ludwig is my dude. You know, from Community, Gambino days, Charles Gambino days. You know, he's on a roll with these movies. Like he's on that next, you know, Danny Elfman, John Hughes level of being that guy when it comes to these scores. In that patriotic scene where these laughters switch to tears and all that stuff, and you see everything like he sees his impact happening. Like these people are celebrating, they're jubilating, they're crying tears of joy. But in his Oppenheimer's mind, he sees it as like his sadness and hysteria and everything. So this movie like is so so amazing on something like the visually like, performances. Like I said, Ludwig really set the scene in a lot of these scenes. The way he uses music, like it's the whole movie like has this like melancholy sound with a little bit of joy sprinkled in, but those joyous instruments and notes still sound very mournful.
I just want to shout out the editor of this film, Jennifer Lame. Incredible lady. And obviously the cinematography by Hoyt van Hoytema, who literally like hoisted an IMAX camera on his shoulder every single day to get these shots. Like the dude is on the level of Deakins. I think it's safe to say that because everything that he has put his hands on
Yeah.
has been incredible.
Those three, like Hoyt, Hoyt, Nolan, Ludwig, they are like the heir apparents.
Everyone who walks away from this film is gonna know it's a visual masterpiece. Like that's undisputed. Back to the performances though, Cillian Murphy in this role, phenomenal, like absolutely phenomenal. And because the film rests solely on him for the majority of it, you really can't screw it up, right? Because it's like it's on you to do it. And everyone who worked with him on this film, and this cast is incredible. They were like, he was our North Star. Like he held everything together. He was so phenomenal in the role. Everything in his eyes, it just says it in the eyes. Like the 1,000-yard stare is like that has to be his signature, right?
Like
Emily Blunt, I thought was really strong. I just don't feel like she had a lot to do in the third act during the court case, but like for most of it, she wasn't really doing much. Like she did make me laugh because she was like a wine mom who like hated her kids. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know if that was intended, but I laughed at it. Um, she played that so well, but she was also like the backbone of like the family and was trying to keep things together. I think within the constraints of the time period, she was as strong as she could be in under that circumstance of being like basically a housewife because that's essentially what she was. But also like being a sounding board for him throughout the trial and all the other stuff. Florence Pugh's character is well, the thing is that Chris Nolan told her that it was going to be a really small role. So like, but she was going to do it anyways because Chris Nolan, you're not going to say no to the opportunity, right? What I don't love is the fact that for most of her screen time, she's nude. I wasn't like a huge fan of that just because I feel like there was a way that they could have done it, which would have been a little bit more interesting. I think the only part of like I guess the nudity, intimacy of that scene or of those scenes was when he's in the when he's talking to all of the investigators in that little room and it cuts to him being nude and then it cuts back to them and it cuts back to her being on top of him and she's like looking into Emily Blunt's eyes. Like to me that was very good because I was like, okay, we're playing around with some surrealism. Like we're doing something a little different. I was like, okay, I wasn't expecting this. That's really
naked,
cool.
You know,
Literally vulnerable, you know?
Yeah.
It's Florence. Like to me, there is so much we could have done with her. I kind of feel the same way about her that I do with Rami Malek, where I'm like, we could have used them more because they're such exceptional actors. Because the way that it was billed and talked about, it seems like Florence was going to be like a huge character. That's what I was going into the movie assuming. So the fact that she wasn't, I was like, oh, okay. A lot of the times in these kinds of stories where it's about like this great invention, you know, it's about the great men who do the great work. And the women oftentimes get left behind in the story, even though they are as important. And I think they've had a young woman who was like a part of their team who was kind of in it. You saw her kind of burst throughout the film, but it wasn't really. Yeah, she shows up, but she's not like.
She shows up like three times. She shows up 3 times, and she only has one speaking line.
Yeah,
and she's also a fellow scientist. Like those 2 women should have been like more screen time. So
yeah. Lastly, speaking of Downey, just the conversation around his performance specifically is like he's gonna win an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and I'm like, I can see it, because he did an incredible job. Like at first, I'm like, it didn't click to me that was him. Like I had to keep, like it kept flashing in my mind, like this is Robert Downey Jr., this is Iron Man, and he's like so good, like just incredibly good in this role. And I really love this for him. Like, I just love that he's able to like exercise those muscles as an actor. Is that Mozart, Amadeus? That's what it is. And like, once that set in my mind, I was like, yeah, it elevated the performance for me.
I think people forget how immensely talented Robert Downey Jr. is an actor.
Having the director in control of the film and having it be driven by their vision, like that's what's drawing people to the to the theaters.
Yeah.
That like that's what's giving you your box office. So just like pay attention to that. This is the first time in a long time where it's like been going to the movies has been like an event that people were excited for since like I don't know Avengers Endgame. Like that was like the last time people actually cared. I hope that they're taking notices of what's happening here because I think it's really important, especially going forward. Like this is the brightest spot in the dumpster fire that's been like Hollywood imploding over the last couple of months. Like,
Yeah, this movie deserves all the praise and adulation. It is honestly an early contender for Best Picture at the Oscars. Did you like that clip? Well, you can listen to the entire podcast because the 16mm Film Crew podcast is available on all major podcast platforms.